guys. Okay, so I am very happy to be here in not in San Francisco, in New York, to talk about a few things about Backbone. And before I start, just something very interesting that came out today is that we are on Stack Exchange. And have you guys seen this? Like I3E wanted to state that computer programming to be officially renamed Googling Stack Overflow. It came very handy. Yeah, okay, just to break the ice. Okay, so I am going to give a talk tomorrow in a conference here. It's called DevCon 5. And then I was in town, so I talked to Joanne. So Joanne I know she's doing a great job here in the Marionette meetup, because I also participate in meetup areas. In San Francisco, I do the Backbone meetup there. And me and Joanne, we talk all the time. So we just found it would be so cool to get together and maybe give some talk. So here am I. This talk today is about, it's from my experience. So I have been working with Backbone for 3 years already, and I wanted to share some things with you. So please, don't take it for granted. It's something that everything that I've written here came from my experience and from experience from my teams. But please feel free to, not agree, okay? Because this is more of a opinionated rundown of why I think some things could be handled better and why not, and I will tell you why, and then you guys take it to yourself, okay? First thing, let me try to enter full screen. Okay, that's better. Presentation mode, that's even better. Okay. So just a little bit of me. I work at a company called Avenue Code, and I am a tech lead at Macy's. So I work with these guys over here. They're from Bloomingdale's. Thanks, guys, for coming. And I do the Backbone.js Hackers Meetup in San Francisco. And one last thing about me is that I'm going to speak tomorrow on this conference, and I just got a prize. There was this air pair contest, so my article was about JavaScript modules.
Could we turn the mic up a little bit?
Oh yeah, sure. Does it sound better? I was just not talking too much closer to the microphone. All right, thank you. Okay, that's okay. So I just got this award, which is very important to me. It was this air pair contest, so it's article. So I trying to do articles and talks. That's me, and I'm from Brazil. You can tell from my accent. So for the agenda today, I had 10 tips. Here's just a summary, and I will go down. So jQuery way, memory leaks, the DOM, overriding the DOM, nesting views, controlling the router, cohesion, coupling, binding your data, componentize, and mocking your calls. And just before I go, this is just something I like to say. I have a little bit of a rant for the word AJAX, because I'm going to use this word here. We should think twice before saying AJAX ever again, because do you really do XML? AJAX is asynchronous JavaScript and XML, but most of the times we do AJAX, because it's asynchronous JavaScript and JSON, right? But you may think it's because of the object called XML HTTP request, but that object also does JSON and also does XML, HTML, and text, right? So since the RESTful APIs became popular, I don't see much of XML around, right? And even in Backbone, XML is not supported natively. You need to write your parser for XML. But AJAX doesn't sound as cool. We like to say AJAX, right? So I'm going to say async, all right? So just in this talk, I'm going to use this term, but you can place it wherever you would think AJAX, okay? And this is just for you guys to remember. Thank you. So let's get started. Avoiding the jQuery way. So this is from my experience. My first project in Backbone actually failed. That was 3 years ago. I was working for Walmart in Brazil, and we tried. We all came from backend development, and we all only knew jQuery so far. And then we decided to put together Backbone. And then everyone still did everything jQuery way. So all the AJAX calls, async calls, we used to do $.ajax. We didn't take advantage of the Backbone models. All the event bindings, we did dollar selector dot on click on everything when we have Backbone that can manipulate that for us. So if we ever had to re-render a view, we would be causing some memory leaks. I'm going to explain this a little bit further today, but that is a much more minimal way of handling stuff. And Backbone is there. One of the reasons is for taking care of that for you. So this is this tip. Backbone depends on jQuery, but depending is not abusing. And this is a very common thing that I did for my first year, a whole year. Oops. Okay. Yeah, so I did the Backbone. I didn't do Backbone model and Backbone views to take care of those events. But this is simple to fix. You just need to put the models and views to do their work. And I know we might not be able to do that all the time, but pretty much every time you have an event and you have an asynchronous call, you should be able to use that. There is a guide here. So those slides, by the way, I'm going to post on the Meetup group. I forgot to post before. So those links, you can follow those links. So this is a very good guide, like step by step from jQuery to Backbone. So it just gets like a 200-line code of AJAX and AJAX, jQuery, and event handlings on jQuery, and they transform that into a Backbone code in a pretty interesting way. So you can just follow along. So that's my first tip, okay? And why that happens, I'm going to explain in the next tip. This is the memory leaks. As you might know, Backbone leaves much of the structure for you to develop, right? That's why we have some frameworks to fill the gap. But the plain Backbone, it's, if you wanted to compare with the other frameworks around, it's much more like low level, more bare bones. And that's good because you have more freedom to do the things your way. But if you don't plan much that step, you might introduce some issues like memory leaks. For instance, this is a view, okay? So in this view, we have this method called initialize, and in the initialize, we check if there is a model, then we are binding an event. Every time the model changes, we will call render. And this render is just alerting to the screen, rendering the view. What's the problem? Let's say if you instantiate two views using the same model, so that model will have two listeners on the same change event. And even if you destroy this view, the model would still have the reference to the view. And then you would see two alerts every time the model changes. That's why whenever the view is getting destroyed, this view is not cleaning up this listening. So this is known as a zombie view, and this is very, very common. So in that first project of me, that happened a lot. So it had lots of side effects, and people, instead of trying to fix from the root, they're trying to remediate the side effects. So it would pop up something else that would then destroy the element, and the code only gets worse. Because we did not understand this was happening. So this is a very simple thing that can be avoided. You just need to, if you are going to deal with this kind of scenario, you need to clean up whenever you want to destroy the view. And this is a manual approach for that. So you can create a method called close that will stop listening. But we need to remember to call this method whenever we destroy this view. And you can even create a method to manage the view's creation for you. So every time you want to show a view, instead of creating the view and rendering the view and attaching to the DOM yourself, you can keep like a current view. And if there is a current view, we will close that current view. And then you receive a new view here, you render that view, and you append to the DOM. So if we have a guide to take care of that for you, then this guy will always remember to call close for you. So this is a very rough idea. This code is not so strong, but just to illustrate that it's good to have this process to be taken care of instead of you doing this yourself. Okay. Can you guys read the code? I don't know if it's too small here. Is it okay? All right. And now I want to introduce you Marionette. So Marionette will do some of those things for you. It is a composite application library that provides very good structure for large-scale JavaScript. And it bundles some good practices and some good patterns, reduces the code boilerplate, provides some modular frameworks with PubSub, like provides a way for you to do modules and much more. I'm not gonna demonstrate the whole Marionette framework here. I'm just going to say how can we fix those problems using some Marionette items, okay? So the first one is that I'm gonna talk today is called item view. You can think that as a view that is specific just to render one single thing, like one piece of data or one model, not like a collection, not like a group of things, a very small concrete thing. And it will automate the model, the templating, and the eventing. And it implements the render method for you. So you just provide this template, and it will render the template from the model and apply that to the DOM. In this case here, this is that same view, but I am, instead of alerting, I am just using a template that was there in a page, in this case an underscore template, which was already available on the DOM. And whenever we initialize, then we will listen to that model, will listen to the change event, and then it will render. And that's it. That's pretty much the same idea that we were doing before. But then, whenever we destroy the view, it will clean up. It will clean up after destroyed. So this is into this idea of, it's important for you to know that Marionette will do that for you, so that you see there is a problem happening that Marionette is fixing, but Marionette is there to take care of that. There is another kind of view that I use very much, it's called region. It's a views container and manager. So it will be the guy that holds the views into it. And this is the guy that's going to show, like, call the render method for you, clean up, after, like, before showing something else, it will clean up if there was a current view on that same region. So a region will take care of a DOM selector. So let's say you have a panel, you have a whole select section on your page, and then you have you want to put a view into that region. So what you're gonna do? You just create a Marionette region. You pass the element that you want, and here I'm creating a view, and I'm saying my region.show view 1, and then since there is no view there, then this region will just render that view and attach to the DOM. And if we call view 2 here, if we do the same thing for another view, it will know that there is already a view 1 bound to that container, and it will then destroy and clean up the memory and bind all the events before calling the new view. Okay, so those two guys together, the region and the item view, can handle the zombie view scenario that I just described before. Okay, so this is one. So I just showed you guys a manual approach and a Marionette approach, and you can of course develop a much better approach on your own. There are many other frameworks as well, but this is just about the problem and a solution. So this is for the zombie views. Okay. So I have 10 tips, right? I will go to the third one now, but if you guys ever want to interrupt me after I'm done with a tip, you guys can do that if you wanna go further anything. So any questions so far? Yes.
It's not a question, more of like a thing about Marionette. It actually supports internally model change event detection. So you can actually, well, not the change event, but you can actually view model events without actually having to bind them during initialization.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a hash that's model event, and then it's an object, and then you put the event, in this case change, :render. That's it.
Yeah, so it works like the event hash of the view, and right? So we can specify what's going to happen. So yeah, it's a very good approach. I think here I was just trying to make something very simple, but if I would do for you, I will go with the hash. That's a better approach. All right. Anyone else? Okay, so let's move forward. Don't overwhelm the DOM. This is another one that caused me some trouble in my first project. So the thing is that DOM operations, they are heavy. They are actually the bottleneck of performance after the page load. So let's say if you are ready to interact with a page, and if you have a lot of things to manipulate in the DOM, the page can get slower, it can hang. So we should avoid doing a multiple number of operations on the DOM and trying to do everything in one shot. So this is what I'm going to display today. Let's say this collection view. It's just a backbone view for a collection. And whenever we do render, there is a for each here, which for each model inside the collection, we are going to create a view for the item and append to the DOM, right? Even if you, like, I learned Backbone from the Code School course, and they do exactly that way. For every item, you create a view and append to the DOM inside this for loop. So the thing is, if the collection has like 1,000 items, you are going to the DOM 1,000 times. And so once I had this app, which is for, it's a kind of a Scrum board, and every time you do some operation, it will re-render and update all the tickets there. And then I was doing this way, and every time, okay, let's finish a story, so it will collapse all the items. So it would really stuck for some moments, so not a good experience. And I could fix that simply just adopting a document fragment. So a document fragment is a virtual element. So this is something from vanilla JavaScript. It's already available on your browser. So here, the render method, I just created a document fragment called fragment, and this for each, instead of appending to the real DOM, it would just append to the fragment. And just once I go to the DOM, bring in the fragment. So by doing this, I could really solve my issues with performance for that particular app. And this is vanilla JavaScript, which is even better. If I didn't want to use jQuery here, I could have done that just using vanilla. That would be just fine, or even better. So Marionette provides a collection view. Actually, it has a collection view and a composite view. I'm going to explain you both. A collection view renders a collection, and it uses an item view for each item. And it doesn't need a template for itself. So you can use, let's say you have a list, like a UL that you have lists inside something, and you don't need to have a template for the list itself, you just want to see the item, so you can use this guy. And internally, it uses a document fragment, so it's pretty smart. And this is very easy. You just need to create a collection view, and you pass which item view you want, and that's it. You don't need to implement render. So as long as the collection view has your models inside, actually the collection has the models, whenever you render this view, you call the render of the items views and render everything there. Now, composite. So before it was collection view, now it's composite view. Composite view is just like the collection view, but you can provide a template for the parent. So let's say you have a table, so you want to provide a template for the column headers, right? So you can just provide here a template. But now there is a little tricky thing, because if you don't have a template, you're going to render everything in order. But now that we have a template, where inside the template do we want to put the children? So we need to specify this selector, item view container. So this is actually a table. So just inside the T-body, I want to append my table rows that relate to the model data. So if you don't do that, they will be appended at the bottom. But if you want to create a table, you don't want to append elements to the bottom. Okay, that's about this tip number 3. Any questions here? Okay, tip number 4, nesting views right. And I shouldn't say nesting view right, because this is just one way. There are so many ways, and this is also not perfect. So there is a very nice article from the guy that created Marionette, and Derek Bailey, and he shows like 4 different ways that you can do nesting views in Backbone without using any framework. And the advantages, like you can do that in the initialization or on the render, or you can initialize some of it and then render another part. You finish initializing when you render, and some combinations. I'm just showing one way here, but this is, I shouldn't say nesting view right. I should nesting views one solution. This is a common view nesting. So let's say you have an outer view that has some inner view inside. Here in the render, first I'm taking care of my view, and then I'm creating my inner view, rendering that, and appending to my container. If you do this way, every call to render will create a new object for the inner view. And if your inner view has some event bindings with the model, like we showed before, this is potentially creating zombie views as well. So those will need to be taken care of manually here. It's never manually disposed. So we will need to kind of, before doing this, you will need to go into, you need to keep a reference of the inner view and destroy that before you render. So how to fix that scenario? You can, in this case, I'm just instantiating once into the initialization, and on the render, I will append my template and then render the inner view. And whenever I close the outer view, I will remove the inner view. Whenever I remove the inner view, it will stop listening to the events and stuff. So this will avoid zombies in this case, but it's not very good. Let's say you have 2 or 3 inner views. You need to remember to do this again for all those guys. And not so good. And still, in the inner view, every time you render, you need also to call this method, like delegate events, to bind the events to the new DOM. Because if you don't do that, the events might not get bound to the new DOM. Like it might still reference to the old DOM, which is may have problems as well. So in Marionette, we can use a layout view. A layout view, now it's renamed, I think it's only layout. It is kind of using the idea of regions and item view altogether. So it's a view that has a template and it has regions inside. And you can name your region. So inner is inner template. Now, I just created an outer view in definition. So here I can just do new outer view and then I render. And later I create my inner view and then I do this, outer.getRegion inner.show inner. So that's just like a normal region. If we do that, I may have 10 inner views and I can control them here. So this will take care of the binding of events and memory issues that would have happened if we didn't take care of manually. Okay? That's it for the tip number 4. Now it's tip number 5, and since it's kind of warm here, if you guys want to take a little break to drink some water, I will be fine with that. If not, I can just continue, but if you guys want, just feel free. Yeah, it's really warm. Yeah.
Presentation, this layout available to like check out later online?
Yeah, so I'm gonna post into the meetup, and that meetup group I'm gonna post in the comments. I will post there.
Can you also post a link to the article you just mentioned on the author of Marionette with the 4?
Yes.
Yeah, please. Okay.
I think I have that. So in the end of my presentation, I have some learn more
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure if it's there, but if it's not there, I'm gonna post too.
Cool.
It's very good.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
We never really used it.
Video recording is weird. It's like
Hmm?
the video recording is weird. It's like almost knew that you stopped and it stopped.
Oh,
I don't know
interesting.
why. That's weird. Hopefully I got everything. If not, it might be like
Yeah,
screen recording a little bit mixed in. For some.
that's okay. That's okay.
Tiago, maybe maybe not this week or maybe next Tuesday, maybe we have like a few screens so we can show you what we have
Mm-hmm.
on our back. We are using Backbone.
Mm-hmm.
Then to show what we have.
Yeah, sure. Let's do that. Cool. Awesome.
Tudo bem?
Yeah, tudo bem. You learned that from the guys?
Yeah.
You know, so Tulio, he was there in San Francisco, and he taught a lot of bad words to the guys there. Probably. So this, what the hell? How do you know this stuff? We always learn them first, right? Pretty funny.
It's like,
It's weird. I don't know what happened.
Maybe it's doing that on purpose. So once, I think it happened to me, I was trying to take some pictures, and then I wanted to do a selfie with me and some background. And then I left that in the selfie mode. And then I tried to point to someone else and it flipped. So maybe it knows when it's time to flip.
Yeah, I don't know. Like it's weird because I guess I wasn't looking at it. I should have done that. Just see if it was recording.
I think it was recording.
It was. Did you see yourself?
I saw myself.
Okay.
Maybe like someone passed there, so he thought, okay, so maybe that's the new thing that I should be recording.
But it doesn't look that way.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah. We'll see.
Let's see.
I'm kind of curious, like which part did I record? Your thing is still recording.
Yes, yes, yeah. I'm gonna call them back.
Can I start recording?
Yes. Hey guys, so whenever you guys are ready, we can continue. Is it enough? You wanna get more water? Okay, thank you guys. Alright, so now it's about the routing. So in the first tips, I was covering more the views part. So this is where Marionette shines. Now I'm going to go over routing and other parts that we will have more backbone-based stuff. Okay, so actually this one is still about Marionette, though. Router. So we have routers in Backbone to control what's going to happen whenever the user interacts with some URL, and that could be bound to your interface. Let's say you have a button or something that you change the URL and then you want the app to capture that, so we use routers. And it's not a very good, I don't think we had good examples when we learned routers, because there in my first project, we used to have one huge router to do everything. And that's also an anti-pattern that I'm going to talk about today. So because of that, routers commonly violate the single responsibility principle because they are commonly used to instantiate and manipulate views, load models, do stuff with collections, coordinate modules. And let's say if you come from Rails or Python, they have a router which is simply putting a call to another module which should be a controller to do the stuff. So your router doesn't do the stuff, right? But our backbone routers, most of the time I see a router, it is doing a bunch of stuff. So it gets harder to maintain, and it will, if it's dealing with a bunch of different elements of the page, it's not a very good design. Because we should be able to break down routers into many routers, one for each, let's say, element or entity that we are dealing with. This way, we would be able to kind of understand the router as like the RESTful API. So if for a RESTful API, we have an entity that you can say, okay, whenever you want to create something, you have the verbs, like you have put, you have post. If you want to read from the entity, you have get, and then you can understand that as an entity. So you should be able to understand the router as an entity with operations around some entity. This would be a better design. And this, according to MVC, the controllers should be dealing with such things. But Backbone doesn't have a controller. Backbone is known as an MV whatever kind of framework. And then many people think, okay, so since Backbone doesn't have a controller, I shouldn't be doing controllers. Maybe I should doing everything on a router. So that's what I was personally thinking. And that's not right. Like, Backbone provides you models and views, and you should be able to create the controllers on your own. But they shouldn't be Backbone controller. They can be just a regular module, function, or anything. Any way you want to handle this. But it should not be part of the router work to do stuff that a controller would work. And by the way, this is very clear. If any of you guys know Ember.js, so Ember, it's very clear this difference. So you can see the controllers on Ember doing this work, and you can think, okay, so I can do this myself. I just can create a plain JavaScript object to do that. This approach is to delegate the route to controllers. So here, everything that happens, so let's say I have a router, it has 3 routes, like empty, home, and product/ID. So empty goes to home goes to home, and product ID goes to view product. Here, home, instead of doing something, it will just call a method from a controller object that is there on the page. And view product, this ID here is being passed here as the first argument of the function. And now we are repassing that to my controller.viewProduct. So this is a kind of a delegator router. And this router will then just be a router and let the controller to do their stuff. So Marionette has an app router. And it's a little bit better because you can specify your controller, and then the app router will have this hash called app routes, and it will delegate to those methods, and it will call those methods on the controller that you're going to pass. And this controller, like previously, Marionette had a Marionette controller, but now they have, they're not using that anymore. You can just pass a plain JavaScript object with methods. So I just create like a brand new thing called my controller that has a home method and a view product method, and the app router will delegate to your controller. And another good practice would be to divide the routes into smaller pieces of related functionality. So let's say you have a food truck app. Okay, so if you have the food and you have the payments and you have, let's say you have many things on the interface that you want to deal with, each one of them can have its own router instead of doing everything to just one big router. Okay, this is an easier to deal and easier to maintain approach than doing everything all together. All right, 6, advocate cohesion. So, as I said, Backbone.js provides models, collections, and views, and routers. But we are not limited to these. And the same thing that I said, many people think we should do everything only inside either models or collections or views or routers. But we can break it down according to our sense of distribution of units. So let's say there is a design pattern called factory. So you can create a factory in JavaScript. You can just create an object. In this case, it's a module. And then you can create your function called create vehicle. Depending on the number of wheels, I want a different kind of vehicle, like a motorcycle or a car or a vehicle. So this guy could be created as a module and could interact together with the models and views and controllers. So just don't think you are limited to the Backbone objects. You can create your own objects as well. Okay, that was a small one. The next one is eliminate coupling. So this is about a pub sub. When we have components that depend on each other, it's very common to make them very tight. So the tight coupling, it is something easy to do, and unfortunately, it's bad for maintenance, because if you want to change one element, you are kind of also impacting the second element, even if you don't want to. And if you want to unit test the first element, it might be hard to not unit test the second element together, to mock one from each other. So there are ways for removing coupling, and one of them is using the pattern called pub/sub. A pub/sub, basically, this is one of the things I'm going to talk tomorrow on my talk on the conference. A pub/sub is a standard, is a design pattern that will enable the user, the developer, to create events where there are subscribers to events and there are publishers. So every time the publisher updates, the subscribers get notified that the publisher updated. Okay? So here comes a simple example. Let's say we want to alert things to the users. So we have two kinds of alerter. This alerter, actually we have just one kind of alerter. This alerter has a method sayIt, and it will call alert method. This is a it's a browser-based alerter. You could create another alerter, maybe using the console log, or printing on the DOM, or sending a message through a WebSocket. So you could have many different ways to alert. And the invoker here, which is the publisher, would be a publisher. Whenever it starts, it will call a function called sayIt on the alerter. So this is not using a pub/sub. So this is the scenario before the pub/sub. So the invoker, whenever the invoker starts, it will call sayIt on the alerter, and the alerter will alert, right? So if you had many other types of alerters, like the console-based or the browser-based, you would need to call all of them manually here, right? And in this way, the invoker is tightly coupled with the alerter, because whenever the invoker runs, the alerter is being called here. Okay. Let's think about a scenario. So let's say you want to build an app for watching a soccer game. So every time someone makes a goal, you want to notify the audience. So every time, if this invoker was like the goal module, every time there was a goal, it would call the board. Okay, board, update now because someone did a goal. Okay. So in this way, the goal module is tightly coupled to the board module. So Backbone and Marionette, they created this Backbone Radio plugin to be a pub/sub implementation for Marionette. It is a Backbone plugin. It's not a Marionette plugin, but it's created by it's being used in Marionette now as the default Marionette strategy for pub/subs. So if you wanted to do the same thing before using pub/sub, here, let's say we have three files. We have alerter.js. We are using Backbone Radio. So on Radio, we can have channels. So let's say I have a channel called alerter. Here I can create a subscriber. So every time the channel alerter receives a message called say it, this guy will react and alert. May the force be with you. And the invoker, the other guy that want to trigger the events, it just needs to listen for the same channel alerter and trigger an event called say it. So now the invoker doesn't have any reference to the alerter. So we have removed the coupling. Because now if you want to use the invoker in another context, you are not bringing the alerter with you. And even better, if you want to unit test this invoker, you are not unit testing the alerter altogether. And the main JS, you just need to require both modules, and that's it. They will play their own. Just to mention, Marionette used to have this Backbone record as a pub sub implementation that just has been replaced with the channel of Backbone Radio. So this subject can get pretty complex. I was just trying to demonstrate the idea of breaking down, but this is probably not enough to use a pub sub because it's just an alerter. But if you wanted to have something more elaborate, if you want to think on a pub sub from ground up, it would be a good idea, because then the components may grow, the complexity may increase, and you don't need to be impacted with that. So both modules can grow harmonically without bringing more complexity to the other module. Okay. Any question? Okay. Yeah.
How well do you think the pub-up subscriber method will scale? Because when you write a huge app, I can see it having 30 different things listening on the same channel and on your thread, and then you don't know if the second thing is depending on it, triggering off.
Yes, I don't think that would scale much farther anyway. But I think the idea would be having more channels, maybe trying to reduce the number of messaging around that. In the case of this pub sub, it may even provoke more calls to the pub sub. So we could, for instance, let's say we have channels. One channel may even send a message to another channel that will trigger even more things, and that can get very complex. So one of the things that I have been studying on, there is a framework called Flux from Facebook that is being used together with React. They have a very different strategy for that. They will just have one guy to handle events, and they are all one direction. So they will not cause this kind of scenario. That would escalate better, but it will reshape the whole flow of communication of your whole app. So I don't think it's applicable to any case. It's a very different approach. It's not even MVC-like, but it's interesting to look up. Maybe that will scale better. Okay. All right. One more for the road. Two more for the road. Binding your data. So Backbone doesn't have data binding in a good fashion like the other frameworks such as Ember or Angular or Knockout. Backbone is manual. Those guys, it's more automated. For instance, if we revisit the first code, right? Every time the model changes, we wanted the view to change. Ideally, one attribute change should just re-render that attribute representation on the DOM instead of the whole thing. So let's say you have a form with 20 fields and you just updated the first name and you change the model. So here, this render function will render the whole thing back again when you just wanted to render one small thing, right? So you could do that manually. You can create a new listener only for that attribute to just go to the DOM and replace something. But that's not very ideal, because let's say if you ever decide to change your template, you need to remember to change this change listener as well. It's not so good. So there are frameworks to create data binding just as Ember would have. One of them is called Epoxy, and it will be very similar to Knockout and Ember. So in this way, you can declare your view the same way, and you can say which data attribute change, what's going to happen. And then it can be used altogether even with Marionette and any other framework. It has, you can put together some automatic view updates, computed model. This is very cool. So let's say you have like order, which a few items, and they have a price, and you have a computed total, a subtotal, and then you want to apply the tax, and then you want to do a bunch of stuff, and those things, they not necessarily need to be done manually. So you could even create a model, let's say not a model, let's say just a function that would calculate after, let's say, one of the items changed. So let's say you, instead of one, you wanted 2 items of that that product, it would recalculate everything back on in the subtotal and apply the tax and show everything without, like on the fly, without having to do that manually. So then you can declare this kind of computed attribute using this framework, Epoxy. So this is an example. Let's say you have a template. It's a div that has a name and an input field for the name, and a span to show the name. And you have a model for that name, right? Lando. And you have a view. So you can specify the binding. So every time, this is an event based, so every time there is a change on the input.name, and if this change is going to, this is an input change, if this is a keyboard change, a key up change we're specifying here, then this, we're going to change the model value of the attribute called name. Okay, so this is saying every time, for every time you press a key, and let's say you're writing your name, so you're pressing all the letters one per one. So for every time you press a different key, it would update your model with that key automatically. So this is updating the model. And the second one is an output. So every time there is a change on the model, we will output that to the span called name. So this is like if you just have an input field and a span. So every time you hit a key on that input field, it will restore that on your model and already display that back in the view on this span. And this would be all automatically handled by Epoxy in a similar fashion as Ember, for instance. So this is just one approach. Of course, we have many other approaches, but this is one interesting way to make data binding using Backbone in a more sleek way. Okay, I have 2 more tips, and I know it's already 8. If you guys give me 5 more minutes, we will be done. Okay. Component. Okay, thank you. Componentize. This is yet another way to think. Okay. So views. If you think views as a component, it makes a lot of sense. But not every view equates to a component. But it would be very cool to have views as components. If you wanted to, let's say, reuse a view into another context, you can think as a component that you just throw in another context and it works. But many times when we create views, we are already thinking about the DOM that holds that view, and it's not super componentized. It's kind of, it has some prerequisites, right? So when we do views in Backbone, we are not entirely creating a full component. We are doing components in some extent, but it's not so easy to create a real true component in Backbone view if you don't think like I want to create a very reusable component. So I want to present another alternative for the views, which many people already know. It is based on web components. So we have a web components spec. So we have a guy called Polymer from Google. It is a library of web components. We have Xtags from Mozilla. They are another library of web components. They are very cool. But what I want to show today is React. So React is a view framework. React is a framework that plays very well together with Backbone. It's just a views implementation, and it will provide you components, like real components, with all the abstraction and composition that a component can get. It will work with elements versus templates. So it has an internal implementation of elements called JSX. You don't have to use that. You can do that also using code. But you are kind of defining the template inside the component, which is, in the first sight, is not very beautiful. But after you get used to that, it's very effective. And it uses something that I'm going to talk later on. It's called virtual DOM. So React, because it owns the DOM inside the component, then it will implement using virtual DOM. Virtual DOM is just like that. Bless you. You have representation in the memory of the DOM structure. So let's say you have a big component, let's say a form, right? And then that same form that I mentioned, you want to change just one letter on the first name. I don't want it to re-render everything. So the React view will have an internal copy of the DOM representation in the memory called virtual DOM. And whenever there is a change, it will calculate what I should change. What's the minimal thing that should be changed on the DOM? And it will just send the delta to the browser. So browser, don't re-render the whole thing. Just re-render that first span, the second children, replace the text, and don't even replace the text. Find the fifth letter and just include another letter there, and that's it. So it will give instructions to the DOM in a much more reduced fashion. So in these terms, it's called virtual DOM because it has a whole copy of the DOM in memory. I'm going to show in a while about how I'm trying to, me and many other people are trying to create this on Marionette, a virtual DOM implementation. But this is a very interesting thing. And React has a data flow. It tries to make you go just one way for the data binding, but you can do both ways, like multiple data binding using React link. And it works on the server side as a bonus. We can use React to replace the whole Backbone view layer. And it just takes a mixing to integrate Backbone with React.Backbone. And this is a simple example. That same idea. We have a model. With that mixing, we can create React.createBackbone class. And we implement render. In the return of the render, this is not JSX. This is like code. So we are creating a span with a class here. I know this doesn't sound cool as a template, but JSX is more templatized as this. But here we can say, okay, this element relates to the model attribute called name. And later we just render the component. Whenever we do that, it's done. Every change in the model will re-render on the view using virtual DOM. So in this way, this view is really a component. It's more of a component from ground up. I know we could have done a Backbone view exactly the same way, but the thing is that when things scale, if you have a code based on Backbone, it's kind of hard to find something really reusable. Versus in React, everything would be much more reusable. Because then we can put one React view inside another React view, and they will take advantage of the React framework as well. And I have a little benchmark here. So this, I have, the creator of Backbone created one benchmark test, and some people have forked it. I have forked it again, just to include everything that I mentioned today. So this is, how is the response? So we have 300 circles here, and let's even make it 500. So 500 circles. Let's say animate with Backbone. Okay, so the average time is like 35 milliseconds per loop. Okay. Now, if we animate with Backbone and Marionette, using Marionette item view, it is a little bit worse, 62 per loop. If we want to use Backbone Epoxy, It's a little bit better than Marionette, but still worse than pure Backbone. Now with React, animate with vanilla React, plain React. It's not looking so good, right? Should it be better, but okay. Backbone plus React is like Marionette, and vanilla JavaScript is pretty fast. That's pretty good. But the point that I want to do is, yes, structure and data binding have a price. So as the chaos of not having them. So you need to think about what is worse for you. If you wanted to have something very wise, like heavy, you probably shouldn't be using any framework. Or using something that doesn't give you all the support, right? And that's the idea. Now my last thing, mocking your calls. This is a very side thing, so it's not related with much of development, more of testing. And many people do that already, but I just wanted to put it for people that don't know that. How can we unit test models that talk to a real server? So let's say you have a model, let's say you're doing some API that talks to Heroku or Google Maps or something, so your model is going to a server. And then if you wanted to write a unit test for that, the unit test will try to go to the server, to that remote server. And if you have a job that will run a bunch of unit tests, your server needs to be up. Because if your server is down for some reason, the test might fail, right? And that's not ideal. And it can also get slow. So one approach is to mock out the server. But this is very common. Many people do data mocks, but it's not so easy to do data mocks if you don't want to ever to change your model. Because you can have the model and consume that model from a data file that would work, but you are touching the model. How do you disguise the machine to think it's going to the server and you give something else? So this is what I'm going to present today. Sinon.js is one approach. It's a very good framework that will augment your testing framework with more spies, stubs, and mocks for asynchronous and for servers. So for instance, here I'm building a fake server and I'm saying whenever we have a get request to /character/422, then you return 200 content type application.json and return this response. People that do a lot in jQuery, the most famous one is jQuery mock JAX. But there is a bunch of other stuff too. There is one called Leche, which goes well with Sinon. It creates mocks and deploys them from the Sinon API, so it's pretty nice. And yes, that's it, I guess, for all the 10 tips. Now, learn more. All of those links that I mentioned before, I'm putting here, and I'm gonna share this in the meetup notes. And I have pretty much links for everything that I said here. It's a very interesting thing to read, even if you are not gonna use that. But this is a good thing for making you to think about different alternatives. So I was thinking about this virtual DOM thing on React, and then I decided to try something out. So I once talked with some guys from Marionette. Sam from the Marionette, he's one of the core developers. He and me decided to try out doing some Marionette virtual DOM. So I have created a project, and to be honest with you, the past couple months I didn't give much attention to that because I was much involved in the article stuff. But this is getting interesting. So this is our project. It's an implementation of Marionette.js using virtual DOM. So we have item view and composite view, and internally they will receive any template you want. They will keep this memory representation of your DOM, and whenever you do any update, it will just update the minimum. So we had a bunch of tests. So it passes on every test from Backbone and Marionette suite, so it works. But so far we only have item view or composite view. We are trying to implement for more views, right? But this is one kind of work that I wanted to say today. Like, if you feel like contributing to open source and you want to help us out, just let me know, because we need to cover up a couple of more scenarios. And it looks very interesting. I got some feedback. So there is actually a startup in San Francisco that is using this. So I got so excited about it. And I hope that we will continue together and develop that thing much further. So this is Marionette VDOM. And the last thing, thank you. A big bold thanks. Special thanks to Joanne and all you guys for the attention. Thank you, guys. Yes. Yeah, so let's go for questions now. Hi.
So you mentioned web components.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about volume, which I'm familiar with.
Yeah.
But you talked about another product. I thought you said like we got your thing. Can you tell me again what that was?
No, React.
Oh, just React.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just mentioned web components for the idea, but I wanted to talk about React. But it's still, so in the Backbone Conf last year, there was a guy that presented how to use Backbone and web components from Polymer. So it's a very good talk. It was, I can even look it up right now. This guy did a very good implementation for that, but I never tried myself. I just tried on React. Yeah, sorry, it's not super clear. So this, it's close to you guys, right? Not close to me. Let me.
Right there. After lunch.
Which, this guy? No.
After lunch.
After lunch? Yes, this guy. Yes. Web components. Yes, this talk is very good. And this lady here, she also works with us. Work at Brenda, so you guys here know. I work with her. She's super nice. She runs some girls develop IT meetups there in San Francisco. Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to say something? Shout outs. Yes, sorry for the weather. Not my fault. But it was great. Yes?
I have a question.
Sure.
When it's a situation where the page has different places where it has to update it, and you have to call two services to update the page. So what I have done in the past is create the model fetch will give you promises.
Mm-hmm.
So I got the two promises and then wait for that to be ready, and then I render the page.
Okay.
Is there a better way or Marionette way to?
There is. So what you can do, let me go back. But this is very good. So using promises is better than using plain callbacks. So whenever you do, not this one. Okay, so not this one, still the layout. Yes, layout. So this layout has regions, and regions will render, right? So you can also chain your promise to the rendering of this view. So I have never tried, but I think that this element here, this object, so not this object, I think there is another object that, so let's look it up. I think there's another object that you can specify a function to be called. But still you can call render from the layout. But let me look it up. Regions. Specifying regions as a function. Yes, so I would start with that. So instead of giving a selector, you can give a function, and then you can say this function, you can put this function chained to your promise. Or you can maybe do the vice versa. Do the promise from the return of this function. Not sure what's the best idea, but so since this is a function, then you can really give the function to the promise and try to see if that would work. What else? Here, we can add regions. So maybe when you add regions on code, you can add a region, but instead of giving this, you give a function. And that function will be the return of your promise. So whenever the promise is resolved, this will be called. Yes, I would start from that, but I'm not sure if there's an even better way.